I'm a design researcher, which also means I'm not a fashion designer. I'm actually an interaction designer. I work with fashion designers. I actually like it very much. I did both at the Design Research Lab in Berlin and also at the Swedish School of Textiles in Borås, Sweden. My research area, therefore, is interactive textiles. So I'm interested in the interaction aspect of fashion, and this will be my perspective during the talk. So it's a very selective one, and it's very much based on time-based issues, because interaction is always about changes in time. So, interactive textiles, for those who haven't heard about it, although it's not very likely while you're in this panel here, it's actually a lot of materials that have a fiber form that come as threads and fabric that are conductive or electroactive, which means that we can use conventional textile production techniques to actually make electronic interfaces, which is exciting because these techniques are very old. They have a lot of tradition, and then we can mix them with like new technologies. And with these materials, fashion actually becomes a medium for interaction, and not only social interaction, but electronic interaction. And this is what it makes a really, really interesting and really new field, because it's also about soft technology. So as far as we know it, it's just small black boxes with buttons, but now we have soft interfaces all of a sudden. So far, actually, what we've seen on fashion technology has been a lot about the expression aspect of fashion, which is very important. So making things glow, it's great, actually. However, my work is more about the other aspects. There is how we actually interact with fashion, like how we interact with the dresses that we have on our body. So it's not so much showing fashion as something visual, but it's more what we do with textiles. But fashion as an interface is a rather recent development. Although we have these materials and we have these opportunities, it hasn't been explored so much as an interface or medium for interaction. Well, I think that, especially in fashion design, textile designs, there are exciting things to learn from the design culture that we can find there, that has a lot of knowledge about the culture and social aspects and how we deal with textiles. And this is an enormously rich field for electronics. If we try to build electronics from a fashion point of view, there's just really, really interesting results that we can get to. And the works that I'm going to show are actually mostly in that field, and a lot of them are experimental. Not all of them are 100% serious, but it's really interesting, I find. And this is what I would like to talk about. It's really then fashion as an interactive medium. And I will do this on different layers, starting rather at the material level, because this is where, right now, we're at a state where a lot of innovations are possible, and where fashion can really come in. Because we have the materials at hand, they are available. You can just get them in small quantities in a shop online. So you can really work with them. It's no longer just in a research lab, but it's in the stores. And then working my way up from the structure, like the textile structure, to the pattern making and the details that you have in fashion, and going up to posture and performance as aspects in fashion. So first about the material structure. The great thing is here that we can actually embed electronics directly into the textile structure, and we can use the textile structure as an electronic element in itself. For example, as a sensor, or as something that does something, an actuator as we call it. So if you use light, you still need a LED, which is a conventional electronic component. But you can also just construct a sensor or a switch from textiles, just barely textiles. And that you can do with all the techniques that we have at hand so far. So this is one example with the weaving. So what you can see here is like, I hope you see it, it's these orange threads. This is actually copper, and this is a multi-layered woven fabric. And it serves as a pressure and a pull switch. So there's nothing else to it. It's really just threads, and it's just the intelligence that is in the fabric itself that produces this kind of switch. So it's like it can be fully integrated into the garment without anything else to it. Similar for knitting. So you can use knitting also to create switches and sensors of that kind. So this is like a relief structure that you can see there, which also serves as a sensitive matrix. So you can actually press certain parts and you will have a response. It's like a touch screen, knitted touch screen. And this works also very selectively. So you can imagine you have like active parts on one part of your garment, and then other parts are just normal, or they have some other function, and you can really well control where the electronic function goes. And this is another example. This is actually from Stitching World. It's a project that investigates this kind of techniques. This is a speaker. So not only light is fancy, but sound is fancy as well, because this is a speaker coil. Just imagine that. You still need a magnet to it, but then you can actually hear the sound from the fabric. So it's an embroidered thread, magnetic thread, and it will produce a sound. So we can imagine to have these elements also in a very decorative way, and they're still very functional, but then we have this blending of the function and the aesthetics at the same time. Yeah. I have to look at my notes. Yeah, and this is one example where you can see how actually these different aesthetics can be explored. So if we have different technologies, of course they will affect the aesthetics and how we build a garment. And these are 3 different techniques here. So you have weaving, knitting, and embroidery. All of them actually produce pressure sensors on a garment. And this was also to explore these exact difference in aesthetics that we can produce while maintaining a certain function, where the two really work well together. Yeah, next point is actually the pattern making. So this is then about how to get from 2D, from the table, to the body, how to produce a 3-dimensional shape. And this is one example from our own lab. This is actually a wearable navigation system for pedestrians, so you actually don't need to worry that you get lost in the city, where you just put on this pullover, and when you walk around, it will indicate the direction with little vibration motors that you have around your chest, and then you never get lost. Great. The thing is here that we try to use the pattern making at the same time to accommodate the circuitry. So you have a lot of conductive lines that you need in this kind of garment. And you usually, like what's done a lot, you hide them away somewhere. But why actually do that when you can use it as an aesthetic element? So what we used here is then what you see, these lines and a lot of different colors. It's actually not just made up, but it's also to accommodate the circuitry. So this was one approach that we tried. I was, okay, can we somehow use the aesthetics to have the circuit at the same time? And this is another example. This is actually from Richard Lindqvist. He's a colleague of mine in Braids, and he just graduated in fashion design. And his work doesn't really have to do with Fashiontech, but the interesting thing is that it's really relevant, because he tried to find a new approach to pattern making. The dominant approach is actually that you have kind of a box system, and he tried to escape that to have something that is more dynamic and fits more the movement of the bodies, and this is why the model actually makes this, to prove a point that the jacket is actually really kinetic and flexible. And he makes garments from one piece, as you can see here, which is perfect if you want to make a circuit on a jacket, because you don't have any seams that you have to jump through. When you do electric connections, like every time you have to stitch something together, creates a problem. And here, use Ricketts pattern, problem solved. Great. Yeah. So coming to the details. By details, I actually mean those parts that you have on a garment, like buttons or zippers, that are, as such, already interactive elements. And these elements can be accommodated. They can be reinterpreted to be electrically interactive elements as well. And this is actually the easiest way of reusing existing details for electronic purposes. And it could be something like that. So this is just a hook and loop fasteners. And with a construction like this, you can also see these are conventional resistors, just used as decorative elements. A very simple, straightforward example that, in this case here, you would be able to measure how many of the hooks and loops are opened or closed by just measuring it. So it has this double function, and this is exactly what we're looking for. Or in this case here, this is actually an emergency jacket, so it can call for help if you're in trouble. And here we use the pocket flaps as switches. So something that is already there in the garment, and you can actually reuse for another purpose. Yeah, we can talk about practicality later. The idea was also that you don't call the emergency by accident. That would be awkward somewhere. Yeah, and then coming to posture, so still a bit further, because fashion implicitly always is about posture. So you design a dress, you also design a position, like a certain way of being at the same time. And this is something that I think fashion design knows a lot about, how to make a person and how to support a posture, like be it loose and casual or very serious. And e-textiles, on the other hand, is more about measuring posture. And I would like to see more of a mixture in this field here, actually, than what we have right now. Because right now, I think there's quite sophisticated examples in e-textile design. Like this one is from TU Eindhoven, Martijn ten Böhmer. It's called Wigge, and it's actually for people who need rehabilitation. It's a shirt that people can wear, so it will measure their performance in the rehabilitation. And they took it quite far, so this is, I think, ready as a pre-product. It looks quite decent for, if you know how other things in this domain look, you would appreciate, but this is really nice. But again, the question is really, how can we support this further? So how can we work with this idea of posture and posture measuring at the same time? And then getting to more extreme postures and movements, maybe, is then, of course, if you have performances, like music performances and dancing. And this is an example from Cobacant, who are also very well known in the field. It's called The Perfect Human. It's actually for dancing a dress that will recognize movement and posture, and then it will interact with the music installation. And the dancer can produce their own music, so to say. And so far, there's a lot of concern that these things work in the first place. But then again, if we can think it further, then how could we work with this idea of posture? Not only what we do, but then how the garment as such constrains it. And next slide. Yeah, this is a really old thing, but I think somehow it fits into this line of thought. I couldn't find any decent picture of how it's actually interacted with, but it's like sleeves, so it's really long sleeves, longer than your arms actually, and they have these stripes here, and if you like put them up, then they will actually also produce a sound, so you have this double effect at the same time. Again, going into this direction of posture and performance at the same time and how they interact, and also with very simple means. So these are just conductive stripes, as you can see, and how much better now this can be integrated into the textile structure and also the garment. So just to open your mind, because finally it's your work. We're waiting for you to help us. Another last point, which is about performance. So, because of course, fashion is not only about a static posture, but it's about how we actually walk around, how we sit, how we stand up, how we do things in our clothing. And there, it's actually a lot to learn on this level from fashion design, as I find. So the further we go, the more there is to do. And this is also an old project, but pretty interesting from the point of view of energy harvesting and making things glow again. This is Ernest Remy Post from MIT. It's called Sparkle Skirt. So it uses electrostatic discharge. The thing that happens to you if you sit on your sofa in winter and move around a little bit, and then you get hurt. So this is the exact same thing. So you have two layers on a skirt, and these two layers will actually rub each other until you have an electrostatic discharge, like this little flash of light. And in this case, it will light up whenever that happens. So the more you move around, or you move around in a particular way, and you shake the skirt, the more you will glow, which is like a direct connection. There's no computing whatsoever to this. So it's very simple, very effective. And then 2 more examples from our online, just to give you an idea of how this conscious performance with the textile could actually lead us and how much further, again, we could go there. And this one is actually, this is how to hack a pullover. So this is a roll-up sensor. So the further you roll up your sleeve, the more the sensor would change. And this is not bound to anything specific that it does right now, so it just does it. But it's this idea to actually you do something very consciously, you interact with your garment, and this can be used in an electric way. And the second one, this is a very simple gesture, actually. This is an early version of the emergency jacket. And that one here has this simple gesture that you put your cuff to your chest, and that will close a circuit, and then again call for help. But it's actually in this simple gesture that it's something that is very specific to this garment and textiles and the human body, that the sensor only works in that particular way. And this is why I put this as an example as well. Yeah. And now I think my 15 minutes are pretty much up. So that's so much for my part. Thank you very much for listening.